Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. BuzzFeed have just published an incredibly flattering profile of me, so I'm going to take 10 minutes to read it. Can you all just talk amongst yourselves, or what? Oh, all right then, I'll crack on with the show. I want to talk about Brexit now for the zillionth time, and I want to talk about it from the perspective of that last caller, bless him, and that notion of the door, the analogy of the door. So there are 100... Actually, that's not even true, is it? I say there are 100 people in the room. There's more than 100 people in the room. It's about 140 people in the room, 52 of whom have voted to go through that door over there. So 52 people out of about 140, because don't forget lots of people didn't vote in the referendum. They voted to go through that door over there, but not only to go through it themselves, to take everybody else with them. And what intrigues me is the very simple question of why people don't want to talk more about what might be on the other side of the door. I thought the last caller nailed it when he said, I'm absolutely confident. I knew all along we were going to stay in the single market. As a leaver, as a Brexiteer, or a Rexiteer, which is becoming an increasingly more accurate description, perhaps. Because the narrative at the moment abroad is that we all knew we were going to leave the single market. What on earth are you talking about? You lost, get over it. Everybody knew we were going to leave the single market. That's simply not true. But that's an argument between people who voted to leave. We're going to leave the single market. No, we're not. Yes, we are. No, we're not. Yes, we are. David Davis says we need lots of unskilled labour to still come. What? I voted to stop it all. I voted to build a massive wall at Dover. I don't want all this unskilled labour coming in, or skilled labour. In fact, I don't want any labour at all. So why don't we talk about what might be on the other side of the door? And if you are like the voters of Richmond Park yesterday, if you are sort of increasingly sort of thinking, maybe we've made a terrible mistake, or maybe we'd be better off sort of staying put and working a little bit harder to reform from within, and you are being told every single day to shut up, shut up, shut up, you lost, get over it, you lost, get over it. Don't you want to know what's on the other side of the door? Or is it, and I'm going to say this out loud, even though it might be a little bit rude, but is it simply that everybody who voted to leave is utterly convinced that their vision of what's on the other side of the door is correct? So here are 4 leave voters, right? One of them isn't remotely fussed about immigration. It doesn't matter if it stays exactly the same, but he's really strong on sovereignty. Oh, yes, we've got sovereignty back. The other one doesn't really understand what sovereignty means. That's not a criticism, by the way. I think most people who use the word don't know what it means, really, as you saw when the sovereignty was enforced by the court and loads of people who'd voted for more sovereignty got cross at seeing sovereignty imposed by the High Court. So you've got the bloke who doesn't care about immigration but's very strong on sovereignty. Then you've got the bloke who doesn't care about sovereignty but really has a problem with immigration. Then you've got the bloke who sort of thinks that we need some immigration but not a lot, and we'll be better off out of the European Union because we'll be able to make our own laws. They're all on the same side. And then you've got the bloke on the end who really doesn't know anything except that he hates foreigners, and the sooner we kick them all out the better. And they all voted leave, right? All of them, from the intellectual wing right through to the knuckle-dragging wing. They all voted for the same thing. They all voted for the same door, and they're all voting to go through it. But they completely disagree with each other about what's on the other side. So if they can't agree with each other about what's on the other side, how the hell do the other 60-odd people in the room who are going to get dragged through that door by these arguing people feel about the prospect of going through that door? And that's what I find so interesting. So interesting. 0345 6060 973. And I tell you now, and I'll tell you straight, that is the reason why people are calling for the debate to be silent. That is why people are shouting from the sidelines, shut up, you lost, get over it. They can't even agree with the people that are on the same side of the argument as them about what's on the other side of the door. So God knows how they feel about people who didn't vote to go through the door, pointing out that most of them don't even seem to know what day it is. And if you think I'm exaggerating, consider what happened in the House of Commons yesterday. David Davis routinely held up as one of the hardest of Brexiteers, one of the most committed of campaigners to leaving the European Union, and rewarded, rightly, I guess, with the Secretary of Stateship for Brexit. He said yesterday that Britain is leaning towards a softer Brexit after ministers had to admit they were considering plans to allow low-skilled migration to continue, and that we could end up paying to access the single market after leaving the European Union.
Well, a little light has been shed today on the government's have cake and eat it approach to Brexit negotiations, but it looks like we may have to pay for it first. The Brexit Secretary David Davis suggested to MPs today that ministers might be prepared to continue contributions to the EU to maintain access to the single market. Our political editor Gary Gibbon is in Westminster. Gary.
Well, one thing you'll probably remember from the referendum campaign, if anything, is that we're net contributors to the EU. We pay a sort of subscription, that disputed figure of 350 million a week on the side of the Leave bus. What you didn't hear during the referendum was the idea that we might carry on paying even if we come out, and potentially quite a chunky amount. But that's what behind the scenes David Davis, the Secretary of State for exiting the EU, has been saying to business people who've been in to visit him. His rationale is that that might be the only way in which we secure the sort of single market access that we get for a lot of our exporters at the moment inside Europe. He's been saying that to them privately. Today, when he was asked by a Labour MP in the House, he was a bit more open in public. And this is what he said when he was asked, could we carry on paying in even when we've come out?
Will the government consider making any contribution in any shape or form for access to the single market?
The major criterion here is that we get the best possible access for goods and services to the European market. And if that is included in what he's talking about, then of course we would consider it.
Interestingly, the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, piled in. He was actually on a visit in Scotland and agreed with David Davis when he was speaking to journalists, almost like he was trying to bag this, cement in this idea. And it has been discussed, as I say, in private with business people, along with another idea, which is the idea that those sectors of the British economy bringing in low-skilled migrants, areas like agriculture and food processing, who are worried about labour shortages, he has been saying, David Davis, in private to business people, that he'll make sure they don't have anything to worry about. So there you are. Contributions could continue. Low-skilled migration could continue. Some Leave campaigners are a bit relaxed about that. Some are absolutely furious. If, big if, Theresa May wants to go down this route, she's going to have to face down some people that until now she's looked like she was swimming pretty close to.
So what did you vote for? I voted for an end to unskilled migration and a withdrawal from the single market. Okay, I'll just keep that lever there. What did you vote for? I voted for some sort of migration controls, but I really wanted to stay in the single market. Okay, so you need to argue with each other, but you're calling time on the whole debate because, hey? So, explain to me, I mean, look, this I get, so quick glimpse of the box of trolls. This is a new development in racism, actually. I don't know if other people with apostrophes in their name have picked up on this. Why don't you go through the door and go back to Ireland, which I've only visited once for a Boyzone concert, actually, about 10 years ago. But I take your point. It's good old-fashioned knuckle-dragging racism. Why don't you go through the door and go back to Ireland? I was born in Derby. But there you go. I get that. I mean, that's just easy to grasp. It's all the people who say they're not racist that intrigue me the most. All the people who voted to leave the European Union and will be just as disgusted by that kind of line about going back to Ireland as I am, as other people are. Actually, disgusted's a bit strong for me because I get it every day. But you'll be disgusted by that because you're not aware of what the swamp looks like at the moment. So why won't they just talk to us about what's on the other side of the door? Is it fear, ignorance, or something a little more charitable than that? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Because I see Farage insisting on the telly that we definitely voted to leave the single market, and everybody knows that. And then I have my caller before the news, was it Robert? Absolutely adamant that he knew we were going to stay in the single market when he voted to leave, and it's very important that we do so. We have all the people who voted because of the lie on the side of the bus for £350 million, who are convinced that we can now have all that money to spend on sweets or nurses. And David Davis saying yesterday that we might have to pay to stay in. I think, and again, facts are important, so that's why I say I think. This is disprovable or provable. I think that Norway pays more per capita for access to the single market than we do, and they have to obey freedom of movement rules as well.
Now, if Boris does get his way and Britain leaves, then what happens next? Well, one option is the UK could end up with an arrangement like Norway, as Boris Johnson and I were just talking about. So, does that mean their situation isn't so bad outside the EU? Well, yes and no. The country is a member of the European Economic Area, giving it access to the single market. But in return, it's had to adopt around 3/4 of all EU directives, with limited say, quite frankly, over how they're drawn up. Although They do have opt-outs on areas like fishing, justice and home affairs. In addition, they also, like us, contribute to the EU budget. In 2011, they paid the equivalent of £106 per person. Here we pay the equivalent of £128 each. And, of course, they have to accept the principle of freedom of movement.
That might be what we end up looking like, paying more than we were paying in the first place and obeying freedom of movement, but we've won sovereignty. That's why people don't want the debate. It really is that simple. From where I'm sitting, the problem is, of course, that all the people who don't want the debate but can explain to me in a really sophisticated fashion why I'm wrong when I suggest that the reason that why they don't want the debate is because they're looking in the mirror and screaming at what they see and what they've done. They can't talk to me about this because they've called for the debate to be ended. So even the people that might be able to say, don't worry, James, I'll tell you what's on the other side of the door. You're getting your knickers in a right old twist about nothing. They can't do that because they're shouting from the sidelines, shut up, stop asking questions, you lost, get over it. Dry your eyes, mate. Dry your eyes, mate. I'm a big fan of that track, actually. I hate to see it being co-opted for political reasons. So keeping it friendly, genuinely keeping it friendly, because obviously you're not going to ring me if you don't want the debate to unfold. If you're one of the people shouting, shut up, get over it, you're opposed to democratic exchange, which is fine. Fascism's on the rise this year, it's great. But anybody else with a brain and a mouth who's happy to use them, just talk to me about my door. Talk to me about my door. Do you understand why, in Richmond Park, for example, the idea of being told by some increasingly busted flushes that we have to go through that door, even though they can't agree among themselves what's on the other side of it, is kind of spooky for the people who never really wanted to go through it in the first place? That's all it is. It's a door. This is when people say, we voted, get over it. You say, well, what did you vote for? Single market access? Freedom of movement of goods, freedom of movement of people, freedom of movement of services, freedom of movement of capital. Oh, God, I don't know, I just voted to leave. Yeah, but what does that mean? I would rather call time on the whole debate than admit that I don't know what I voted for. That is the banner for 2016. I would rather silence all conversation than admit that I kind of voted for a soundbite that turned out not to be true, or for a slogan on the side of a bus that they admitted was a lie before the ink was dry on my ballot paper. Jack's in Blythe. What do you want to say, Jack?
Yeah, well, I think we were looking at things that people were voting for on the other side of the door. According to your LBC colleague, Nigel Farage, one of those is 5% wage inflation, apparently, next year.
So we're getting that, are we? You'll forgive me, I was at church when he was on the radio, but was there a claim that we're going to see wages go up next year?
Well, one of his callers challenged him and said that in the next year he would become one of the most hated people in Britain.
Yes.
Particularly on one of the things...
But he was talking about his wages, you fool. He's off to America, isn't he, to make loads of money on the speech circuit, which means wonderfully he's going to be an economic migrant and a foreign elite at the same time in America. And if you believe the story in the Sunday Express...
cost on his salary, hasn't he?
Well, he's already gone up because he's paid in euros. No, he wasn't talking about wage inflation for anybody else. He was talking about, well, he's doing what he always does, surely, and just talking about himself.
Well, his caller was actually talking about price inflation, and that was one of the things that he cited that people would then turn against Nigel Farage against. So Nigel Farage's answer to 4 to 5% price inflation was 5% wage inflation.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, does it? Because you need to shut up. You lost. Get over it.
Well, I think it matters if you're a business.
No, shut up. You lost. Get over it.
Because in a business...
Dry your eyes, mate.
In a business, it's not just 5% price inflation, it's 5% wage inflation.
Yeah, but we've taken back control, Jack. Get back, Jack. We've taken back control. Who needs money? We've got control. Who needs wages?
If you look at most businesses, anything between 70 to even 80% of a business's cost will be its wage base. So 5% price inflation on the goods and services that business buys. Anything then between 10 to 15% wage inflation.
Why won't they tell us what they think's on the other side of the door? Is it simply because, as you've illustrated with this reference, that they can't agree with each other, even when they're on the same side where we're going? So how the hell are they going to be able to reassure people on the other side?
Well, I think that most businesses in this country would never vote for anything that would increase the costs of running that business by 5%. I don't think anybody voted for a 5% increase in their wages because we all realistically accept that wages have been stagnant in this country since 2009.
And the rest, mate. You should work for the Daily Express. You haven't had a pay rise probably since 2009. And most people in my profession haven't had a pay rise for 10, 15, 20 years. But of course, you put it in the hands of a demagogue who has read the Bank of England research into wage compression and read the same results, that there really isn't any, except a tiny, tiny amount in some sectors like care work. But it doesn't matter because it butters parsnips. It makes a great speech. It's a lovely soundbite. Wages have been kept down. Oh, tell you what, Jack, people like you make me sick. You can prove anything with facts. Here's the deal, all right? We're all screaming at each other. We all hate each other. We're living in a time of epic division. But occasionally, between 10 and 1 in the morning on LBC, we find an oasis of calm when we close the box of trolls and leave them to fight amongst themselves. And just look, you voted leave. I didn't. That's fine. We're going through that door right there. That's great. Can we have a chat about what's on the other side? Or can you explain to me, in a way that at least has a semblance of credibility, can you explain to me why you don't care what's on the other side of the door? Because that's really strange. Really strange. And it's the only explanation for calling for people wondering what might be on the other side of the door. People like me who just want to have a look through the letterbox. I tell you what, let's hold hands and just have and open the door a tiny bit before you pull me through it. Let's just have a peek through the crack in the door, have a little chat about what we can see, and then maybe have a rethink. Why is that so controversial? Now that we know a lot more about what it's going to look like than we did on June the 23rd, why not have a bit of a rethink? Why does that make people so cross? It's like Trump again, isn't it? All Trump supporters are crosser now than they were before. That, of course, was the plan. They've got an army in place now, an angry army waiting for their next round of orders. But I like to think Britain is a more sophisticated country than that. Ron's in Wandsworth. Ron, talk to me about the door.
Good morning to you, James.
Hello, Ron.
Yes, like you, I'm worried about the door, and I voted Brexit.
Okay. Well, you have to tell me then what's on the other side of the door, don't you?
Well, that's exactly what's worrying me.
Oh.
I voted Brexit. I mean, this will only take 2 seconds. I voted Brexit because I thought the economic arguments were relatively finely balanced.
Yes.
But then I decided that I really wanted to be able to, put one over the unelected elite in Brussels, basically, and that's why I voted Brexit. Maybe that was misguided. However, we are where we are, as you keep saying. But I try
not to say that, actually. But if you've caught me saying it, I shall take my medicine.
But I would now very much like to see through that door and see what we're going to end up with. I admit my failing in not thinking about that beforehand.
But why then you help me out then, because you're clearly not one of the people shouting at people like me to shut up, get over it, you lost, dry your eyes, mate. Why do you think people... Because it's in your interest as a Leave voter and my interest as a Remainer to have a look at what might happen next. Why would anybody not want you and me to do that, Ron?
Well, I mean, I'm finding that difficult to explain, James. I watched a rival programme on the TV last night where I was amazed at the vitriol against Remainers.
Yes? Well, I mean, welcome to my world, but what you must have an inkling of where it comes from.
I think there is, I hate to use this phrase, but I think there is a north-south divide. I think I think
it's not even north-south. But there is a sort of north-south divide. I guess places like Liverpool would be anomalous to that. But and that adds to the elite narrative, doesn't it? This idea that we don't know what it's like. But then they're blaming the wrong things for their problems. That seems to be the message.
That seems to be the message, and I would very much hope, if there is any mechanism, which I doubt now, because it's a 2-year negotiating progress, and then it's, the door is closed on that. You can't prolong it. But I would hope that, in fact, when Parliament eventually gets to vote on whether to activate Article 50, that they reject it pro tem, so that we get nearer to a general election in 2020 and the possibility of expressing an opinion on where we are then.
Oh, but who with, mate? Who's going to... I mean, around whom is the sort of cautious... Around whom is the caution going to coalesce, Ron?
Well, the caution will be expressed by politicians who want to remain in power in 2020.
But the official opposition isn't really doing that, is it?
Well, we just as we are saying that the playing field may change by elections in Italy this weekend, then France early next year, then possibly Germany later in the year, and the Dutch have got an election.
Oh, everything's up for grabs now. Everything's up for grabs.
But what I'm suggesting is that in that time, our political scenario could change. I know not how, but it could.
Yes, of course it could.
So, though one shouldn't overstate the impact of Sarah Olney's victory, it might just have a few Tory MPs looking over their shoulders, especially some of those backing Brexit. June's referendum split the country. The areas in red here all voted to leave the EU. The Remain voters in blue were largely in the south in places like Richmond. And there are a number of seats the Lib Dems may have their eyes on, like, for example, St Albans, where 62% of people voted to stay in the EU. Its Tory MP, Anne Main, holds a smaller majority than Zac Goldsmith, and the Lib Dems came close to a win here in 2010. In Altrincham and Sale, again, 62% voted Remain. Their Brexiteer MP, Graham Brady, also has a smaller majority than Mr Goldsmith. And in Enfield Southgate, the majority voted to Remain, unlike their MP, David Burrows. And Paul is here to discuss this and other matters. We've got, I know we have to be careful not to read much into a single by-election. We've covered enough by-elections to know what they do and perhaps what they don't mean. Nevertheless, are some Tory MPs worried along the lines we suggest?
Well, it's been a while, hasn't it, Tom, since a Tory was terrified of a Lib Dem. And I don't think Zac Goldsmith is setting a new trend on that front tonight. Look, if the Lib Dems were going to win anywhere, it was going to be in Richmond. They used to hold the seat, they used to hold the council. It was one of the largest Remain votes in the whole of the UK. So I think, as you suggest, we've got to be careful about drawing any conclusions from that tonight. There will be another interesting test next week in the Sleaford and North Hycombe by-election in Lincolnshire. Now, that is a very different seat. A majority of people there voted to leave the EU, and their MP actually resigned because he felt the government was heading towards a hard Brexit. UKIP are kind of more the threat there. The Lib Dems tell me they would quite like to come third. If the Tories have another bad night there, then I think we are into new territory, where all that talk a couple of weeks ago about this sort of early election starts to sound quite foolish, and Theresa May's slender majority starts to look even more trim.
OK, by-elections aside, we have seen some signs, I think, of, maybe only temporary, but the old left-right occasionally being replaced, really, as the political kind of map of Britain by in or out or hard or so. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, when the words left and right come up in politics these days, it tends to be in the context of should we have left the EU and are we doing it in the right way? And
that's very good, Paul. I like it. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
That creates some kind of interesting dynamics in different parts of the country. So, we see UKIP as the kind of big Brexit force in the north of England. Perhaps in the south, the Lib Dems becoming this resurgent pro-EU force. The one party we haven't mentioned tonight, of course, is Labour. Now, their position hasn't always been clear on the EU. They lost their deposit in Richmond, one of their worst performances in modern history. If the plates in politics are shifting, perhaps it is Labour who will fall through the cracks.
OK, well, let us see, Paul. Thank you very much for now.
I'm going to have a go at answering a question you couldn't answer, but I'm going to use you as my guinea pig, so you need to stay on the line. I think the reason why all the people shouting, shut up, get over it, they're just not as honest as you, Ron.
Maybe, but
they're seeing what you see. They're thinking, crikey.
They're also frightened of possibly what they've done.
Well, that's kind of what I mean, as you are honest enough to admit. But the more you've got invested, and I guess the angrier you got in the build-up, and people have fallen out with family members. The fractiousness has been huge. People have been unfriended on Facebook, guys. I mean, God, that's serious. And now to say, yeah, actually. Because it wouldn't just involve saying, I think I was wrong. It would involve saying you were right, and I've been screaming at you and calling you a scumbag for the last 18 months. But if you speak to sensible people like Ron, this is what you tend to hear now. 0345 606 0973. I don't know what's on the other side of the door, and I don't really understand why I voted to go through it without knowing. I guess I just believed some of the people who described what it would look like, and now I know, because they've told me themselves that they were lying. Dan's in Leicester. Dan, talk to me about the door.
Good morning, sir. No idea what's on the other side of it.
Well, of course you haven't. No one does.
Exactly. I voted Remain instinctively, didn't even have to think about it. I've since done a bit more research in true Brexit fashion, and I know the economic idea of the EU a little bit less convincing than I did. I don't think it's an economic project that can work, really.
So we'd be better off out of it, then?
The thing is, as an
astonishing sound effect.
project-
It's an amazing noise you just
Thank
made
you.
there. No, seriously, kudos.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. You see, culturally it's awesome. Politically it's pretty awesome, although it isn't working very well at the minute. Legislatively it works. But economically it doesn't. So that's the problem. That sort of addresses the 4 different levers that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, who are all arguing with each other.
Yeah, but their underlying theme is those beautiful 3 words, take back control. And whether it's legislative, political, economic or cultural, that's what they felt they were voting for, to take back control. They can't agree on what that means because it depends individually
Well,
on
let's
how
pick
it
them off. What were the 4 words again? That was beautiful. Can we record this? I want to nick this and pass it off as my own in the future. Go on, what were the 4 words?
So legislative,
right? Well,
being able to make our own laws.
We're not going to be we're not going to be able to retain access to the single market, are we? Without obeying the laws laid down by the single market, just like Norway has to.
Okay, so problem number 1.
Next.
Politically, so we feel like we've outsourced our legislative process to Brussels.
Which is when I say to my callers, what laws is it you don't like, and they can't tell me, but that means I'm a bully.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean they're ignorant. I've read out a couple of tweets previously from the UKIP representatives in Sutton, and they were bombarded themselves with instructions to, and I quote, grow a pair and call in. I'm delighted to say they have. Glenn's in Sutton. Glenn, what have I been getting wrong?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call. And I'm going to offer a small apology for my initial tweet.
No, come on. The UKIP's all about saying what you think and standing up for your convictions. Don't start backtracking before we've even said hello.
I'm not backtrack completely.
All right.
I do find your interviewing style is it's your trademark and you're excellent at it.
Thank you.
I do sometimes feel, though, that...
Tell me what I've got wrong.
I'm not going to say what you've got right or wrong because politics, it's a very personal opinion. I mean, I'm not...
Well, let's not do opinions. Let's do the facts. What have I said that's factually incorrect? Because you're tweeting for impartiality. That suggests that I've been... In fact, you used the word bias as well. What have I said in the last 54 minutes that's wrong?
I'm not saying that you've said anything. I am, actually. I'm going to say that...
Well, make your mind up, Glenn.
I'm sorry. Factually... the UKIP party are not the BNP in suits. That is a fact that is incorrect.
Well, no, that was one of my opinions, but it was based upon the fact that the candidate who rang in at 10:10 couldn't come up with a policy that UKIP or a change to Britain that would be brought about by withdrawal from the EU, except to mention that BNP's immigration policy would become law.
Well, as I believe Donald was trying to say, it's not necessarily about repealing laws immediately. It's a question of...
But you keep telling us that 70% of our laws are made in Brussels, and we have to claw back. So what laws? You tell us now. You do what Glenn. You do what Donna failed to do. What laws need to go?
I'm not going to talk about... I don't want to repeal a law specifically right at this minute. What I'm saying is, it's the right to determine your own laws. It's like...
Well, give me the proof that we don't.
Well, you know what the proof is because you heard one of the EU commissioners say it yesterday that 70% of the laws are made and set in Europe. You heard it yourself.
No, I didn't. And I don't want you to quote EU commissioners at me. I want you to tell me what these laws are that we shouldn't have, that we've failed to resist, that we didn't want but ended up with.
Again, you're deliberately misinterpreting.
Glenn, I promise you I'm not. I'm asking someone who believes that our laws are made in Brussels to tell me which laws he's upset about.
I'm not upset about any laws. There are some things that I don't like.
Go on, tell me, what?
Specifically,
yes.
What I'm saying to you, what we're all saying to you is, we believe that the government of Great Britain should be making the laws for Great Britain. They shouldn't be being...
So what are the laws that they couldn't make?
Sorry, what laws are...
What are the laws you want the government to make that they can't because of Brussels?
Oh, you're very good at this, James.
Because I'm right.
Again...
Now answer the question.
Which question you want me to ask?
What laws? You represent UKIP in Sutton. You phone me up after being rude on Twitter. Respect to you for that. It's not going terribly well. Respect for you for that even more. What are these laws that we can't make that you want to make?
Any.
Yeah, any.
All laws. We can't...
Go on, give me one.
Okay, how about making trade agreements with other countries outside the EU?
We can do that. What do you think we've got? What do you think we've got with America? What do you think? Where do we export most of our arms to? Next.
Okay, suppose we wanted to know... Okay, you know what?
Do you think you should close? Do you think you should close the Twitter account?
No, absolutely not.
All right, well, give me the law then. Come on, give me another one.
I've given you an example. You asked for an example.
And I've just pointed out to you, we sell all our arms to countries outside the EU, so we must have trade agreements with Saudi Arabia, probably even still with Syria. So give me something that's true.
Okay, well, Donna already mentioned free movement of people.
So close the borders, back to the BNP. Give me something else.
No, it's not the BNP.
Yes, it is.
To do with the BNP.
Yes,
no,
it is.
Not really.
So what's their policy on immigration?
I'm not familiar with their policies.
It's exactly the same as what you just said.
As you well know, UKIP is the only political party that banned members from the far right.
It's the only political party that had to, Glenn.
Pardon?
It's the only political party that had to.
Well, no, Labour have ex-BNP councillors.
Yes, but they've changed their views. BNP people who get into the UKIP ranks patently haven't. But you're distracting. You're doing what politicians always do, Glenn. You're trying to steer us away from the central issue.
I'm a very normal person. I've never even been a member of a political party before.
So, what is the law that drew you towards UKIP? What was it that you woke up in...
I tell you what, it wasn't a law, a specific
law
that
what
drew
was
me
it,
towards UKIP. It was, having been formerly a Conservative voter,
yes.
I became increasingly disillusioned with Mr Cameron, and maybe this ill-conceived and ill-fated coalition. I got upset with the cast iron guarantee of an in-out referendum that didn't materialise.
On a treaty that doesn't exist.
Well, you know, we can go into technicalities.
That's not a technicality, it's a statement of fact. Either a treaty exists and you have a referendum on it, or it doesn't and you don't.
And you don't. Okay, well, there was no referendum.
And anyway, now he's pledged to have a referendum, so you should be back in your good books again. Glenn, do you think this could have gone, when you picked up the phone, do you think this could have gone any worse for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I could have taken a lot more of your bait, but I tried not to because you're so good at this. I'm
not good at anything, Glenn. I'm asking you questions that you can't answer, which you think...
Well, you're not. You're asking me questions that I've already said aren't relevant to the point I was trying to make.
So the question about what laws do Brussels make that you hate... That you can't name any. The fact that you can't name any.
This is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so you don't hate any laws. They haven't done anything that you don't like, but you've joined a party that is uniquely dedicated to withdrawing from that institution that's done absolutely nothing that you've got any problem whatsoever with. Glenn, I mean it. I really mean it. I think you're a big man for ringing in. I don't think you will again.
Yeah, so the other one is political.
Yeah.
The third is economic, which is to do with globalisation and the global...
but the Brexit Secretary of State has said we're probably going to have to carry on paying in anyway.
Yeah, and the final one is cultural, which would be them immigrants, that argument.
Immigrants,
but it really
all the ones that complain about Christmas.
Yeah, they are. You see, you should be glad I didn't call in yesterday. So the problem, so you've got all these different motivations for voting Brexit. They all mean take back control. And the reason why we get the shut up, you lost, get over it argument is because any threat to the take back control thing looks like you're trying to outsource that control again. And that's what people really don't want. That's when they all circle the wagons, because the control is the important thing.
Here's the thing, mate, and this is genuine, Dan. It's coming while you've been talking. Yeah. I'm obviously having a little glance in the box of trolls today. You are such a whiner. Just move on. Almost every day you complain about Brexit. Wait for it. Stop making people feel bad about their democratic vote. That's it. We got it. That's why they want you to shut up. Shut up! You're making me feel bad. I've done a boo-boo.
Dear.
And that's a number. I mean, I can see that's not a joke. The history of that texter is on message, shall we say? That's not a joke. Stop making people feel bad. So that's all we've got now, you and I. Like your arguments are bang on, because they thought we'd be taking back control. They're beginning to realise that was a fairly meaningless phrase. But actually, the motivation for people shouting, "Shut up! You lost. Get over it. Stop making me feel stupid," is what they're saying, right?
Yeah, well, the take back control thing is infinitely malleable. It just depends what you think you've lost control of.
Yeah, and the more you look at the facts and the more you look at the figures, the more you realise that it was a fairly meaningless soundbite.
Yeah, but it really works. I mean, I've got friends who are teachers who feel like they've lost control of the way they teach their kids. People in the NHS who feel like, well, you know how they all feel.
Yes.
It just depends how Brexit affects you. If you suffer because of them immigrants for whatever reason, or you feel like you do, then you're going to vote Brexit. If
and that is ultimately all that we'll be left with. All will all that we'll be left with, perhaps, will just be that thing, which means when David Davis said yesterday, we're going to need high levels of low-skilled or unskilled migration, and we could pay to access the single market. Otherwise, we'd be punching ourselves in the face. There'll still be a decent number of people, a significant swathe of the electorate shouting, punch, 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 punch me in the face. Max is in Nottingham. What's on the door? What are the scores on the doors, Max?
Hi there, James. Thank you for having me. I just want to sort of set out that I'm a student at University of Nottingham and I voted to leave the European Union. But my view is that what's going to happen on this sort of, once Article 50 is triggered, is that we're likely, in my view, to have a sort of transitional deal rather than sort of
then you have to have an argument with all the people on your side of the vote who want to leave now. I've got people who've changed their Twitter description to trigger Article 50 now. So you need to have an argument with them. How do you think the people at the back of the room, wondering how the hell you're going to solve that argument with each other, feel about the fact that you can't even agree on what's on the other side of the door?
I don't necessarily feel that a transitional deal is what I necessarily want or what people do want either. However, I think it's a reality, though, that in terms of this negotiation process, it's unlikely that the government will take us out into WTO trade deals, for example.
Well, yeah, so that's 10% tariffs immediately on everything.
I think that's unlikely. Therefore, I think.
Well, then that's not the WTO trade deal, then, mate. With respect.
No. So I'm saying that I think some form of transitional deal where we'll be in the EFTA or the EEA is likely.
And then plenty of people say they voted to leave that. They don't want anything to do with it at all. You're being thoughtful, and I'm late for the news, which is the only reason why I'm moving on. But the point I have to make again and again and again, because it seems astonishingly that nobody else is, that your neat and informed analysis of a pro-leave position will actually upset more fellow leavers than remainers. They will be shouting at the radio, we're triggering it now, we don't want a transitional deal, we don't want to stay in the EEA, we don't want to stay in EFTA, what's the WTO? I go to MFI, it's 11:32. And I'll just give you a flavour, because sometimes when you think you've got an answer, you get a bit carried away. But that text saying, stop making people feel bad about how they voted, that to me is the only, at the moment, compelling explanation or answer to the question of why don't people want to talk about where we might be going as a country? We voted to go through that door. I want to know as much as I possibly can, as quickly as possible, about what's on the other side. Why on earth don't you want to? Answer, because as soon as you point out that we voted to go through it without knowing what was on the other side, or having believed a load of lies, you make me feel bad, James. So I don't want you to talk about it. And that is that great phrase, we are where we are. That does appear to be where we are. Whatever the arguments to remain, says Andy, people voted for independent self-government. Well, we won't get that if we're paying in to the European Union. And strict controls on immigration. Well, we won't get that if we want to stay in the single market. So you didn't vote for that. And lots of people who voted to leave, Andy, did so for one of those reasons while completely rejecting the other. And so it goes on. I mean, it's actually unbelievable. Oh, I don't know, but Pauline Egham is honest, okay? You've nailed it. I hate to say it, James, but I voted out, and your introduction has finally made me realise all the things I couldn't work out at the time. Thank you. Then my favourite, move on. Almost every day you complain. Stop making people feel bad about their democratic vote. That's what it is. That's where we are. Stop making people feel bad. It's quite incredible. And then here we go. Here we get the usual stuff about living in leafy Chiswick in a £2 million mansion. Crikey, it's gone up in price, and not on a second home in Bordeaux, and you don't know anything about anything. That's great as well. Well done. Brexit isn't a door, James. It's more like Jamie and his magic torch. Jump down a hole from a gloomy house to a completely bonkers world. I did fully understand what was going on, and I enjoyed it, said Rick in Lancashire, who voted for a bonkers world. Your numbers, your calls, 0345 6060 And here's Peter saying that he knows why he voted. It's because his daughter lives with me, with her baby and her husband on the Islington Council list. And he voted, let me get this right, she viewed the flat, never got it. It's given to a Somalian family with a Dutch passport who've been in the country for 5 weeks. My daughter and her husband are saving for a deposit on their house, and it's hard work. There will be no foreigners who get in social housing before people born here of any colour. And of course that's a valid position, although the decline in the availability of social housing over the last few years has probably got more to do with the decline in the availability of social housing over the last few years than the nationality of the people who you feel jump the queue. But that Peter is the argument. I voted for this. So how the hell is he going to feel when the Secretary of State for Brexit stands up in the House of Commons and says we're going to still need a lot of unskilled migration coming here because they all need houses? Sean's in Portsmouth. Sean, what's going on?
Good morning, James.
Where's the door and what's on the other side, Sean?
Once again, you've really made me think this morning about my vote.
Sorry.
No, it's not a bad thing at all. I'm one of these open-minded leaders that doesn't mind discussing the issue.
Oh, good.
Doesn't shut my friends down who voted Remain.
Dry your eyes, mate. Shut up. You lost. Get over it.
Well, you talk about people drying their eyes. I mean, I was playing poker with a few friends of mine Friday night last week, and unfortunately, a few of them have been made redundant due to the fact that we're leaving the European Union.
Already?
Yes. And it's not just that, a couple of others around that table as well were facing the real prospect of it as well.
It's a really, really bad line, Sean. I don't know why. I've got that kind of weird thing going on, like when you've got one window open in the back of the car. So I don't want to move on yet, but I may have to if things don't improve. How does the fact that your friends are losing their jobs now make you feel about your vote?
It doesn't make me feel particularly great, obviously, but I suppose I just kind of had to suck it up really Friday when you're sat around a room full of people losing their jobs because you've gone into the ballot box and voted to leave the EU, and as a direct result of that, their employers are now saying, "I'm sorry, but there's no job for you," basically. And then you mentioned about what's the other side of this door.
Yes.
I think a lot of this boils down to access to the single market, and this is what I think the crux of the argument is now. I think a lot of people are saying that access to the single market is the same as membership, whereas as I understand it, they're two different things, and what the real crux of that is then is whether we get the same trade issues as outside the EU as opposed to being inside the EU.
Yes, I mean, if access is membership, effectively. Norway is the most obvious comparison to draw here, which is probably why the more rabid Brexiteers are so desperate that we don't draw parallels with Norway, despite the fact that that was one of the countries they held up in the campaign as an example of what we could have. You pay more, I think, per capita, and I haven't triple-checked this, so I'm happy to withdraw the observation if I'm wrong, but Norway pays more per capita to access or to be in the single market, and it has to obey the freedom of movement rules as well.
I mean, a friend of mine who's a staunch Remain voter was talking about the Norway model on Friday, and as I said to him then, I said, I didn't vote for a Norway model or a Liechtenstein model or any
Canada
sort of
Plus.
model.
Canada Plus is the new one.
Or Canada Plus, or whatever it is, whatever the sort of spin they like to throw out. I voted for the British government to get a British deal.
Yeah.
And for me, if they turn around to me now and say, right, we're going to pay for access to the single market, I say, okay, I'm willing to make that concession because we're going to be leaving the EU. But they turn around and say we're going to pay more. It's just good. Like,
how on earth are they going to let us pay less? I'll tell you what you need to do to find out what the future looks like, Sean. Ring up. Are you a member of Netflix?
No.
What are you a member of? What do you pay a monthly subscription for? Have you got Sky TV?
I do have Sky, yeah.
Right, ring them up now and tell them that you want to keep all of the channels you've got, right? But you want to pay less than you currently do.
You'll be surprised at this, James.
Well, you do. You might get half price Sky. You might get half price Sky movies for 6 months. I realised when I said that that's why I preferred Netflix. Actually, that's why Netflix. But you take my point. Why on earth are they going to give us a better deal than they give to the people who are in it?
Well, the beauty of that is that in business, customer is king, and they want to keep your said business. And I know this is an old argument, but we buy more than we sell from the
Which is why you go to the head of the German Automotive Association industry spokesman and say, it's true, isn't it? You sell so many cars to us, you're going to care more about that than you are about anything else. And the bloke says, no, it's a political union. The politicians will be making these decisions, not the business people.
No, maybe not. But what I'm saying is if the politicians are going to turn around in the EU and say to their various industries, so for example, the German car industry, if you got Miss Merkel saying to the German car industry, right, Britain's left the EU, so therefore we're going to put 15% tariffs on your cars that you sell to the UK. She's going to have a queue as long as the eye could see outside of her office saying, what are you doing?
But that's the point. That's why she looks so spooked at the moment. Her job is damage limitation. She voted the opposite of what she's having to deliver for the British people because of people like you.
No, I appreciate that, but like I said, I just can't envisage a situation where major industries like that in countries like Germany...
But before you voted, you couldn't envisage a situation where your mates from poker would have been sacked by Christmas as a direct result of what you voted for.
No, I couldn't envisage that. I mean,
and that's happened.
I know, and that's where your door analogy comes in so useful, because like you said, I mean, I'd quite like the government to start, you know, what they call putting the red lines out there, basically. Then just tell us what's going on, because at the moment, all we're getting is airy-fairy nonsense, basically, and But that's all you can have. That's all you can have, because you've just been doing it yourself. I can't believe that the German car industry won't do this and won't do that. It's nothing to do with the German car industry. It's everything to do with the politicians and the policymakers. Before you go, did you win at poker? I finished second, and my other friend who voted for Brexit, he won that night, so we
Oh, great. Adding insult to injury. So not only have all your friends been fired, but you rinsed them of their redundancy payments over poker on Friday night. Avoid Sean in Portsmouth. It's 11:45. Sadiq Khan is out and about today, presumably trying very hard not to look too smug about the defeat of his erstwhile nemesis, Zach Goldsmith, from mayoral favourite to unemployed in 6 months straight. Rachel Venables has been with him. We'll be catching up with that imminently, finding out what he has to say about events in Richmond Park yesterday. Intrigued, increasingly intrigued, and increasingly, odd though this will sound, I'm quite encouraged by today's conversation, because it would appear that there is no argument at all. Why do people want to shut down debate about what's on the other side of the Brexit door? Why are people shouting, shut up, shut up? Well, it's because they're absolutely spooked by the conversation. You can't even agree with each other as fellow Leave voters about what's on the other side of the door. What on earth have you got to say to people who want to know where you're going to drag them to? So of course you're going to say, shut up, shut up, shut up. Get over it, get over it. Have we got Dry Your Eyes, mate? I used to have a jingle, you know, that was The Streets, Mike Skinner. It wasn't that one, though. It was the original pirate... I'm talking absolute gibberish now, aren't I, from the perspective of about 60% of the people listening. Who's Mike Skinner? What's he talking about? Dry your eyes, mate.
Dry your eyes, mate. I know it's hard to take, but her mind has been made up. There's plenty more fish in the sea.
Dean's in Brentford. Dean, talk to me about the door.
You're talking about the door as if everybody in the room before you open the door is in the same situation.
No, I'm not.
If you've got, well, you're putting it as if we're all in a room, we're all in the same boat, but we're going to...
No, it's a room, not a boat. There's no doors on boats.
Somebody else is sitting on a razor blade. The person sitting on a razor blade is going to open that door because it's better than what they've got now.
No, not if there's two razor blades.
We're not all part of the chattering classes who sit around chattering about this stuff.
Well, you're chattering now.
Really bad time.
You're chattering now.
If you want to get to an analogy, the same as you're talking about the door, before you get to the door, there's a reason why people wanted to open that door. I think of it as pretty like the Poseidon Adventure. Some people are in a nice part of that room. Other people are having a really bad time.
I get that, Dean. I completely get that. How do they know?
Shut the door and keep the door shut. The only thing they're going to turn on is the other people.
How do they know that it's better on the other side?
They don't care if it's better.
Well, they will do. They will do if it's worse, won't they?
Of course they will. Of course they will.
So why aren't we talking more about what it might look like?
If you're going to get it over with quicker. But I'm telling you one thing: if the door is not open to let those people out, they're just going to turn on the people.
Yeah, you keep saying that. I recognise that the threats of violence is part of the debate now.
It's not even part of violence at the moment. But
you're turning on people is turning on people is a description of violence, Dean. Anyway, I'm enjoying our chatter. It's nice to have a chatter.
Things couldn't get worse.
Yeah.
Then don't open the door. Then you'll find out that things can get worse.
Yeah. The point is this, my friend. The other side of the door, for the people who are poor, will almost certainly make them poorer. So why on earth...
They're already in a situation they don't like.
Yes, and it will be even worse. So why on earth don't you...
guarantee that?
Well, can't guarantee it is very tough, but all of the available Yes,
So they want to open the door.
So all of the available indicators are that
If their only choice is to be told by somebody sitting on a settee while they're sitting on a razor blade, stay there, you're probably better off, rather than open the door, they'd have to be stupid to listen to the person sitting on the settee saying, sit there.
Yeah, unless when they go through the door, they're made to wear a suit of razor blades, Dean.
Well, it'd be over quicker, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And that is probably, that's the best we've got, is it?
Some people have had enough.
Yeah, no, everybody gets that, but the question is, why don't you want to talk about what happens next?
Because I'm sitting on a razor blade and I want to open the door. Because you're sitting on a settee, you can sit there and talk about it for the next 4 weeks.
Okay.
It's not going to affect you, is it?
What isn't? No, that's the whole point. The people who are worse off are going to get hit harder than people like me.
Can you guarantee that?
I can give you pretty incontrovertible evidence.
You've just told us that we can't guarantee what's on the other side of the door.
No one can read the.
Oh, dear.
Okay, mate.
Open the door, isn't he?
Yeah,
Otherwise, he's just sitting there being told to sit still and be quiet.
No one's saying sit still and be quiet. They're saying the exact opposite. They're saying let's talk more. Let's have a look through the door. Let's have a conversation.
While you're sitting on a settee, he's sitting on a razor blade.
Have you got?
He doesn't talk about it anymore. He wants to open that door just to find out what's on the other side of that door. He's in no.
Why don't we have a look first?
They're debating it.
Why don't we have a look first?
Because unfortunately, as you just said, you can't sneak a peek through the door.
Yes, you can. You can have a conversation about, is it going to involve the single market? Is it going to involve freedom of movement of goods, freedom of movement of people, freedom of movement of capital? Is it going to involve access to the EEA or EFTA? Is it going to involve different types of border control? Is it going to involve this?
While you're sitting on the settee drinking
what have you got against settees?
Somebody else sitting on the settee while somebody else is sitting on a razor blade. They don't care about all that.
I think I agree with you. I think I agree with you, Dean.
So it's not a fact that they all think they've made a mistake. It's just that your situation is the same. You can't guarantee what's on the other side of that door. So why should I sit here in a really bad situation, listening to people who are in a better situation in the same room?
Because they care about you, Dean.
Not open that door.
Because they care about you.
Not open that door.
Because they care.
If they cared about me, why am I sitting on a razor blade?
Because you have been persuaded that your problems have been caused by.
Right, Dean, most things come to a class issue. You've got different classes of people.
Exactly, they come to a class issue. Dean, I'm going to have to insist on being able to say something to you, okay, about, and I promise not to talk about sofas or razor blades. The reason why you are sitting on a razor blade is because of distribution of wealth, poor worker representation, and the demise of the trade unions in this country, all of which scenarios are going to get worse when we leave the European Union. But because that razor blade is so sharp and so shiny and it's cutting into your buttocks so deeply, you don't care. You don't care. And I get that. That's fine. I get that. But the people who've shafted you are not the people who are now saying, I'm worried about you being even worse off than you are now, Dean. They are not the people that have shafted you. They are not the people that have made you sit on a razor blade while luxuriating on their own sofa. The people who have made your existence as unpleasant as you describe it are not the people who are now saying, I'm really worried that people like Dean are going to be even worse off afterwards than they are now. Have you really not got a sofa?
I'm not an optimistic person.
You're telling me, Dean. It's 11:56. Nina is in Hammersmith. Nina, what would you like to say?
Hiya. I was just you almost lost me at the suit of razor blades.
Oh, mate, I don't know what was going on there, but anyway, we're all right now.
I was just going to say, the thing is that these, conversations should have really happened when the campaign was going on. That's all that's coming to, the front now.
You couldn't have these conversations during the referendum because they came out with these meaningless sound bites like £350 million and 75% of our laws, and proper debate was shut down.
Well, what's happened, I was a Remain voter. What's happened, James, is that these people can't admit what's gone on, and that's why you're getting these shut up and move on.
No, you don't know what it's like to sit on a razor blade, though, Nina.
No, the thing is, it just reminds me of even with my colleagues at work, if this was a light-hearted kind of, I bet that's what's going to happen or whatever, you could back down later when you were proven wrong. But when you were passionate and you have put your all into it, and this campaign was so epic, you just can't back down now. And the reason that some of the Leave people are turning on themselves is because they're thinking, we're already in this situation, now just don't let the side down.
No, it's not that. It's because it's not. Dean's argument. We got a bit bogged down in razor blades and sofas, but the argument that everything is awful, any change is desirable because my situation is so awful. That does hold water.
Well, they fell for that. That message was being pumped, and people fell for that hook, line, and sinker. that's what happened. But it's just nobody knows what's behind the door, and no one's going to find out, James.
Oh, no, unless you're Dean, and if you're Dean, you don't care what's behind the door because you're so uncomfortable now that you don't care what's behind the door. Then, of course, you go to all the people who historically have been speaking out against austerity. You've been speaking out against the distribution of wealth. You've been speaking out against unfairness and injustice in society. You go to those people who have a track record and a history of speaking up for people who need help, and you ask them where they are now on this one, and they will say to you, well, if there are economic penalties, if we do suffer financially, obviously the less you've got to start with, the more you will suffer subsequently. And that, of course, is another point at which they want to start shouting, shut up, you lost, get over it. Because the idea of poor people actually ending up being the biggest victims of post-Brexit economic troubles, if, and it is only if they happen, well, that just... that blows the bloody doors off, doesn't it? Speaking of doors, it's just turned 11:58. And James in Clapham, you don't care what's on the other side of the door either, right?
Right, James, I'll be quick because I know you're going to go for the news. I don't care what's behind the door. Quite strange. I trust my government. I trust my ministers as a day. End of the story. Just breathe it in, mate.
Prime Minister voted Remain. The Prime Minister voted Remain. So the Prime Minister that you trust, mate, doesn't want to leave the European Union. She's having to do it because of people who voted against what she considers to be the best for the country. So if you trust the Prime Minister, no? If you trust the Prime Minister, then you should have voted the other way. Should we do more scores on the doors after 12 o'clock? Or should we do something else? I don't know. Phones are ringing off the hook, but I'm not sure I can take any more conversations about razor blades and sofas. Don't care what's on the other side. That's fine. I get it. You're mad. You're absolutely crazy, but you're honest. Shut up and stop talking about what might be on the other side. You kind of know you've done a boo-boo. You're just not ready yet to admit it. I wonder when you will be. And so the sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, the backpedaling, is it? Begins for people like Boris Johnson and David Davis, who had fairly clear messages prior to the referendum vote and are now having to perhaps recognise the reality of complication. Davis backs soft Brexit in blow to hard liners. It's not really the language that helps. This vocabulary of violence is so unhelpful because everybody hates each other at the moment. And, you know, I'm very much part of that process. Loads of people hate me. Furious. Well, stop asking these questions with your pesky facts. All I want to know is why we aren't talking more about what's next. What's on the other side of the door? And why on earth are the people desperate to run through the door marked Brexit as quickly as possible with their eyes shut? Why are they so concerned about people having conversations about where they might be going? It's truly baffling, isn't it? Except it isn't. It's 2016. I don't care where we're going. I don't care where we're going. I just want people to register how angry I am. And it's all somebody else's fault that my life is rubbish. It probably is somebody else's fault, but it is not a Polish car washer's fault that your life is rubbish, or a Romanian potato picker's. Andy is in Anglesey in North Wales. Andy, what are the scores on the doors?
Hiya, James. I feel in all of this, people are forgetting that there's also the rest of the EU involved in this. And I read a lot of the main papers in Europe, because you can get them online in English.
You can.
And the EU negotiating team is already investigating the legality of forcing us out in 14 months.
Yeah, they don't want it. You're absolutely right, and we're not getting that in this country. They think that they're oscillating between sympathy and waiting for us to come to our senses, and thinking, well, if they're not going to come to their senses, they can clear off.
Yeah, they want us out before the next European elections. They don't want this overspilling into it, and the negotiations still going on while the European elections are taking place, because they're worried that other countries, it will affect how other countries vote. Yeah. And they also don't want us returning MEPs to the European Parliament.
And the door, I know that you're right. It's a broad generalisation about the feeling of the media. You can also find coverage that is very envious of our decision to vote to leave the European Union, but none of it contains any meaningful descriptions about what is on the other side of the door.
Most people would have voted to stay in if Cameron could have brought back a deal on freedom of movement. It was freedom of movement that is the killer on this, and it always has been and it always will be. if May and the Brexit negotiation team have too soft a Brexit where there are no limitations on freedom of movement, people will turn on them at the next general election, big time.
I think you're probably right. I mean, I don't think that they should. I think that there was a great example yesterday. It was Question Time in Wakefield last night. I think 92.4% white British. Everybody convinced that immigration is ruining their lives. I don't know how you deal with that. Because do you know what? People, even if we stopped all immigration now, most people's lives would get worse, not better.
Well, it's well, it wouldn't stop immigration. It would control what sort of immigrant came here and what sort of visa they
David Davis said yesterday. David Davis said yesterday.
Under what terms?
Yeah, well, I mean, visas and work permits.
Ending freedom of movement, all that will do is relegate EU migrants to the same status as international migrants that already come here. That would limit their access to our social welfare.
So could you sell it in a way that didn't actually... I mean, they've already got limited access to our social welfare system. There's already a fixed period of time that you have to be here before you can claim it.
That's for international migrants.
No, it is for EU migrants as well. It's the same in Germany. If you want to work in...
The big killer is their access to welfare benefits and their big killer...
But I'm not going to come and work here if I don't get the same rights that other workers get.
Well, you'll get the same rights as other immigrant workers get, and if you think you're entitled to more rights than other immigrant workers get, that actually makes you a racist.
Say that again?
You will get the same rights as other immigrant workers get.
I want all workers to be treated the same.
Well, they will be treated the same. All immigrant workers will be treated the same. They'll be treated as...
The same as non-immigrant workers?
They'll be treated the same. No, you can't do that. That then is freedom of movement, and that is what people vote.
And that is going to be the deal breaker. And the idea that David Davis can call upon thousands and tens of thousands of unskilled migrants to come and work here in circumstances that are less attractive than now, I guess it's very emblematic of the whole debate. Which, okay, I will be happier if they still come here, but they get treated worse than they do now. And I think he's right. I think Andy's right. I think that's where the British people have been led to. Okay, all right, I can just about see why it's necessary, but I want them to get a worse deal than I get and a worse deal than they get now, and then I'll vote for it. So once again, you're persuading people to vote not to improve their own lives, but to damage other people's. Tom's in Launceston. Tom, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Mr. O'Brien. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks.
Good. Oh, flipping out, where to start? So oh my gosh, I think it's quite simple, really. So I vote. I know it's not. I know that the language and the dialect in terms of what we've been listening to from both sides before, during the referendum, and all of that sort of stuff was a bit of was a sham. Really, it was ridiculous. And I just think it's quite simple. Before, to use your analogy of the whole "what's behind the door" thing. Think about living in a flat that you don't own, or when
I'm beginning to regret this analogy. Don't mention sofas and razor blades, will you?
No razor blades, none of that sort of stuff, or sofas. But look, if you're making a decision about leaving the place that you are, before you make that decision, you would think that most people with half a brain would make an informed decision. So I think I'm 30 years old. I run a business in this country as well. We don't trade internationally, but my suppliers do. They import and export materials. And I know that since the Brexit, I actually had a conversation 2-3 days ago with one of our suppliers when we were out to dinner, explaining that things have really affected his business and the value of what he's got to pay for his materials to be imported and what he gets for exporting has completely changed now, and that it's a lot worse off exporting and a lot more expensive to import in a way. So, and that's just before we've even left, if you know what I mean, because of the fear and stuff. And anyway, before you leave somewhere, you would understand where you were going to, and I don't think that what the last caller said, to be fair, I actually agree with, the fact that most of the people are quite uninformed due to the fact that the information we receive is lacking.
It's there if you want it. It's there if you want it, but if you're having stuff poured into your ears about 75% of laws and 650 million quid on the side of buses and we want our country back and sneering metropolitan elites, you're essentially debasing truth and facts. You're saying, well, I've had it on this programme. You could have had people actually say to me with a straight face, you can prove anything with facts. I know what I know. And that's the debate. But people like me struggle not to sound condescending, because it seems to me that everybody on your side of the vote chose to put feelings ahead of facts.
But I think I would agree with you. I totally agree with you, actually, to be fair, and that's the problem.
Yes.
Is that now that people have put their feelings before the actual facts and not been, in my opinion, listening to the referendum and watching it on TV and the pieces of paper we got through the door and why we should stay, why the government think we should stay, and then other people saying why we should go, was ridiculous, to say the least.
But you voted leave then, so who had your ear? Who led you to that?
The reason I voted leave, ultimately for me, was because some of it was because of what the last caller said, and that I felt like, based on the very, very ridiculous and limited and very manipulated information that was received via the TV or some of the radio, unlikely good sell, to be fair, actually present things in a very straightforward and understandable way, which is great. I felt that at the end of the day, over the last 43 years of being in the EU, how has it benefited us? And from what I read, and a few of my friends that give me some what appeared to be facts, I just thought, well, do you know what? I don't really see that it's actually benefited.
And that is it. That is it in a nutshell. Is that no one really made a powerful case for staying that you heard?
Exactly. But now you've got people like the guy a couple of callers ago talking about razor blades and sofas that just need to like open their mind a little bit and actually listen to what you're actually.
No, but he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to. He's sitting on a razor blade. Why should he open his mind?
Well, he'll always stay sat on it then, unfortunately. He can't complain if he does, because that's where he'll end up.
Could get worse.
Well, that's it. But then, of course it will. And then he'll still be complaining, but some people are half full and half empty. And it really annoys me that at the end of the day...
I'm putting you, then, in the Joni Mitchell box, am I, as a Leave voter? Are you telling me that you don't know what you've got till it's gone?
You could potentially say that, indeed, I suppose. That's how you want to think of me. But I just think, look, at the end of the... I still think it's ridiculous. We knew what we had when we were in it, and that didn't appear to be beneficial that I could see or understand. So I think the idea of potentially getting some control on border restraints and potentially
it's still attractive to you. And I mean, for the record, I hope that you're right. But just to refer back to the media briefly, Rupert Murdoch told you to vote Leave. Paul Dacre, the editor of the Daily Mail, told you to vote Leave. The Barclay brothers, the billionaire owners of the Ritz and the Daily Telegraph, they all told you to vote Leave. Most people on this radio station would have told you to vote Leave. Most newspaper columnists, all newspaper columnists in the Mail and the Sun, the best-selling papers in the country, would have told you to vote Leave. Then you factor in the Telegraph and the Express, all telling you to vote Leave. So I don't know where you would have gone to get a calm and measured account of why staying might have been quite a good idea.
Yeah, no, I agree. There wasn't really anywhere to.
There wasn't.
It felt not for me, and I don't even read half those papers.
Doesn't matter. They set the tone. They set the agenda. They set the sort of conversational timbre of the nation. If you let them, and we did, and that's why we are where we are. So you actually end up with people having parties at the Ritz with billionaire owners of the Ritz and newspapers to celebrate sticking one over on the establishment. And it's also how you end up with Donald Trump getting elected on a claim that he was going to drain the swamp, and then appointing by far the richest government in the history of that country. Almost all of that wealth originally inherited as well. But that's how you stick it to the elites in your golden lift. Tom, thank you. See, we can do this. We can have a conversation. The problem is that either you're going to sound like Dean, who, bless him, effectively said, I don't care if my life gets worse, I still want to rush through that door without knowing what's on the other side of it because my life is so bad. And I am obviously historically someone who has believed that food banks are necessary in this country, argued that the bedroom tax was despicable, contended repeatedly that the distribution of wealth is unfair. So how do I end up on a different side of an argument from you? Answer, simple. We all agree life is unfair. We all agree that the wrong people are suffering, but we don't agree on why. You've been persuaded it's because of Polish people and Romanian car washers. I'm pretty sure it's because of billionaires who don't pay tax. Still no Christian backlash. I'd like to wish everybody listening to this programme a Merry Christmas. I'd like to encourage you to go to church on Sunday. It's good for the soul, whether you actually believe in God or not. Think of it as a combination of a sort of meditation and a self-help book. You don't have to believe in God or miracles. I also have to issue an apology. I may have suggested yesterday that I believe in miracles was the work of Smokey Robinson. It wasn't, was it? It was a hot chocolate. I believe in miracles. It was, yeah, hot chocolate. That's an appalling faux pas. That's 2 apologies this week. I had to apologise yesterday to the lady who was laughing so hard while listening to the programme. She fell off her stepladder while painting her shed. Got into all sorts of bother. So that's my other apology. You don't have to believe in miracles. You don't have to believe in God. Go to church, sit still, listen to some really, really nice messages from the Gospels of stuff that Jesus said. If you're lucky enough to have a priest who gives a good sermon, listen to that as well. Thought-provoking, thoughtfulness, encouraging niceness, be excellent to each other. That's Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, not the Bible, but there's quite a lot of crossover. Treat your neighbour, or treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. Try to understand the wisdom of being taught to turn the other cheek. Flies in the face of what most people who claim to represent Christian values stand for. So I wish you Merry Christmas once again, and I urge you to go to church on Sunday, a Christian church. That's the only kind of church I know well, and I can really speak for the value of going to church. And apparently now, according to the Conservative MP Fiona Bruce and the Prime Minister Theresa May, I'm going to get some sort of backlash. I'm going to get some sort of backlash now. So it's 10 o'clock yesterday morning. I started down this road. I even said a prayer on air. And still no Christian backlash, Fiona Bruce. I don't know quite what is supposed to... Or is it that you can't say in public that I want to discriminate against homosexuals, or I want to say really vile thing about Jews or Muslims? Is that what you mean when you say that you can't talk about your Christian beliefs in public without a backlash? Because I'm talking about them endlessly now. I'm going to bore you rigid talking about my Christian beliefs. Seriously. Dominus vobiscum, friends. And nothing's happening. There's no complaints, there's no backlash, there's no criticism. I'm going to put some decorations up, maybe even some Jesus-y ones, equal baby Jesus, see if anyone complains. Have a chat. My favourite tweet in response to this absurdity, because we all know what it is, it's code. It's code for cozying up to Islamophobes. Yesterday, when they put the clip on Twitter of me saying, I'm not sure this is about upholding Christian values, I think it's about subtly actually cozying up to Islamophobes, guess who replied? Loads of Islamophobes. It was incredible. So it was almost as if it became a self-fulfilling prophecy to stay with the religious language. 22 minutes after 12 is the time. Let's get back to Brexit. John's in Crouch End. What are the scores on the doors, John?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who, the 52% who voted Leave, but to me it was never a question about immigration. I voted Leave because I didn't want us to be in CETA. I mean, for me this is a disaster because I do most of my work abroad. I bill my clients in euros.
What did you think was going to happen then?
Well, the thing is, I'm someone from the left, so to me, it's I take the Tony Benn position about the 5 questions of power. What power do you have? Who gave it to you? How can we get it? To me, it was a political question about democracy, and it's been hijacked over the question of racism. And I don't think there's a consensus about free movement because, the 52% isn't a monolithic bloc. A lot of us are people...
No, but this is, I think, why they're shouting down the debate, because they have to pretend that it is a monolithic bloc. So they have to say things like, everybody knew we were voting for the single market withdrawal. Everybody knows that we voted for migration controls. Everybody, as if... And they can't agree with each other, so no wonder they don't want to have an argument with the rest of us.
It's a mistake. They could have had, like Switzerland did have, a referendum on free movement, and then would be clear. I would have voted against ending free movement.
Interesting.
That's what they should have had. If it's about EU migration,
but we'd have to withdraw to end free movement. You get that?
That's right.
Yes.
You can. At least you know where you stand. At least you can say, well, look, we'll end free movement, and then what will follow follows. But now we've got this leave the EU. God knows what it means. It's just we need either another referendum or an election where people put forward their negotiating position. Otherwise, it's just a mess.
Well, I kind of part of me goes, well, it's your fault. It's not my fault. It's your fault, John.
I didn't want this referendum. I knew it would be awful, but I voted for my principles. I didn't want to have a referendum on free. I'd rather have a referendum on CETA or TTIP or something like that.
God knows, spare us from a. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's something that is actually that lends itself to a binary yes/no vote, as opposed to something that so categorically doesn't. But briefly, then, what do you think is motivating the people going on your side of the argument, shouting at people like me, "Shut up, you lost, get over it, dry your eyes, mate"?
Because they want to silence voices like myself.
As well.
They don't want people like me. The thing about the whole referendum debate, people forget that in the 70s, the left was a dominant Eurosceptic position. It wasn't the right, it was the left. It was a position of the left. Now, all of a sudden, what was a traditionally left-wing position has become, things have just flipped over. So people with the left-wing viewpoints are saying remain, and those on the right are saying leave. In the 70s, it was completely the other way around, with the exception of Enoch Powell. But, it was the trade unions. It was a large part of the Labour Party that campaigned in 75 not to join the EEC.
There was a big tranche of that. Tony Benn, of course, their patron saint in many ways. John, thank you. I'm moving on only because Rachel Venables has joined me in the studio, which means either that you have some political news or you are part of the you're part of the anti-Christian backlash.
It's very difficult. Which one do you think it is?
Let's go with the mayor. What's Sadiq Khan been up to
Absolutely.
today?
Well, obviously, we've had some huge news coming out of Richmond today with the announcement that the Lib Dems have took that seat from Zach Goldsmith. Goldsmith, and in many ways I think you'd be forgiven in thinking that this is entirely a story about how his 2016 has gone from bad to worse. This time last year he thought that by now he'd be London Mayor, and now he isn't even an MP. But it was also a very difficult night for Labour. Not only did they not win, they also lost their deposit. They got just over 1,000 votes. So earlier I was speaking to London Mayor Sadiq Khan, Labour Mayor of course, and asking him what he thought about that.
Well, look, Richmond Park's always been a Lib Dem versus Tory seat. There's no news there. And people have, for very good reason, decided to vote tactically. Nothing new there either. It wasn't the first time, wasn't the last time. Won't be the last time people vote tactically. What's clear is that the people of Richmond Park have spoken, and I'm hoping the government takes on board what the people of Richmond Park have decided to do over the course of yesterday. This was a seat where at the last general election, the Conservative candidate had a majority of more than 23,000. This is a seat where the Conservative MP up until recently was somebody who was in favour of hard Brexit, and the people of Richmond Park have spoken.
And how much do you put this down towards Brexit? And obviously the new MP, Lib Dems as well, have been sort of fired up by this. They say this is an anti-Brexit vote. Do you believe that that's the sort of sentiment that's being echoed in throughout London as well?
Well, look, London was the one region in England to vote to remain in the European Union. We voted decisively so. In some parts of London, 80% voted to remain in the EU. And what's important is that the government hears what London is saying. London is saying that, yes, we accept the verdict of the rest of the country. You may have voted to leave the EU, leave the structures and the legal institutions. What we haven't voted for is losing jobs, is to have less growth and to lose prosperity. We want to make sure the government does a deal with the EU that ensures we have access to a single market, that we continue to be able to attract talent, and that we protect the jobs in London. And it's crucial that the government realises that hard Brexit is not only bad for London, it's not only bad for the country, but ultimately will be bad for Europe as well.
So, Sadiq Khan saying rather more than some interviewers managed to get out of him, but not necessarily saying anything new.
No, not necessarily. I think it was quite interesting, though, the way he did almost scoff at the start when I asked him about how difficult was this for Labour as a Labour voter. And I think for people in his camp, certainly speaking to his staff earlier this morning, it was very clear that they saw last night as being quite bittersweet. Of course, Zach Goldsmith has been accused of fighting a dog whistle politics when it came to his bid to try and beat Sadiq to becoming London Mayor. So for them, almost a personal victory in him losing, but also in terms of their party as well, very difficult for them. He tried to brush that off, but it is clear, of course, that has had an impact on them.
Yeah, it's interesting that, Rachel, because I started the programme this morning from a similar position, but the consensus is, including people who've anonymously told me that they were actually Labour activists and canvassers who on the doorstep would say to people, actually, vote for Sarah Olney, because it's more important to get Zach out than it is to keep our deposit. They didn't say, but I guess in retrospect that might be their logic. So we'll have to wait and see whether or not the Labour Party establishment has anything more substantive to say. Do you like interviewing him?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I do, but he has an ability to...
He's a lawyer, isn't he?
Yes, you ask a question and then you get to the end of the answer and you realise he's deftly moved away from what you initially started. He's good. He is, I think, quite open sometimes. But
a little bit more ammunition for the next speak to Sadiq than I had for the first couple, given that he hadn't had his feet under the table very long. But I'm glad it's not just me who sometimes gets to the end of an answer and finds he's forgotten what question he asked in the first place. Rachel Venables doing sterling work for LBC. I'm James O'Brien. You're listening to LBC with the time approaching 12:30 already. It's one of those days. I've just come on air, flicked the switch, started talking, and now it's half an hour from the end of the programme. I want to stay with the Brexit thing. I'm glad, I'm proud actually, we've managed to have a slightly well-measured conversation, and I have to apologise to Andy, who says I've had to turn you off now. I don't always agree with you, but I enjoy the show. Suggesting people should attend church is just patronising. It was kind of tongue-in-cheek, Andy. I can't do anything now without having to explain myself in the rear-view mirror. It was kind of tongue-in-cheek, just to show that I can suggest you go to church and that Christianity is cool, kids. And look, no one's coming to take me away. Whatever Theresa May might have said, or the Daily Mail says today about there being an anti-Christian backlash in this country, because they don't mean anti-Christian. What they mean is, I want to be able to stand up in public and say that we should be able to discriminate against homosexuals, and I don't want to be shouted down. And when I use the Bible as a meaningless, fraudulent fig leaf to justify my own prejudices, I don't want to be called out on it. I essentially want to be able to speak hate unchallenged. And if you think that's Christian, I'm a pomegranate. I got quite something fun to do after this, actually. I'd forgotten about it. We've invited a couple of kids from a school in Feltham to come in, and they've kind of won their debating competition in school, so I'm going to do that after the show today. I'll play you the results on Monday. Make sure you are listening. 03456060973 is the number you need to contribute to this conversation. Now, I guess we should probably do more on the Christian backlash, shouldn't we, if we can. Yesterday we had one caller who told us that when he worked for Transport for London, some of his non-Christian colleagues complained about his Christmas decorations. I thought we'd finally found some backlash, but then they weren't taken down. They were still up. So this notion of there being some sort of Christian backlash, I'm just waiting for it while praying. In fact, I'm praying for it. No, that might explode the matrix. You can't pray for a Christian backlash as a Christian, can you? That's too confusing. Back to Brexit. Dawn's in Hunsdon. Dawn, what's on the doors?
Oh, hello, James. I've got 2 points to make, and hopefully I'll get through the first point before you chew me up. And I do go to church as well, so can you be nice to me? My first point is that I don't think we knew, if we stayed in, what would be on the other side of that door in 10 years' time. And the other side of the door, everybody keeps saying, all the politicians saying, we want this, we want that, we want hard Brexit. It's like a Christmas list. They can ask for whatever they like, but they're not going to be able to get that list until Article 50 is triggered. So why everyone is getting their knickers in a twist over we want this, we want that, like a load of kids, they can say we would like this and we would like that, but you can't demand what you want now because it's not Christmas yet. Article 50 hasn't been triggered. My second point is, in Europe, I think Europe is about to implode on itself. If you've only got to look at the press with the other countries, their elections coming up, and I think within the next year to 18 months that the EU will sit back and say, hang on a minute, guys, yeah, perhaps we should listen to the people. And if David Cameron had been listened to before he triggered the referendum, when he went in and said, look, we need to just tweak it a bit here because the British people are not very happy about this, I don't think we would have ever gone to a referendum.
Oh, he had to do the referendum. It was a manifesto pledge.
Yeah, but he would have. I don't think that he would have had referendum in the way that he actually put it over. I think maybe the question would have been different.
Like what?
I don't know. I don't know, James.
Okay.
But I just think that.
How could it have been different? I got a question about leaving the European Union. How else could it have been phrased?
Well, like the other gentleman said, maybe it would be about immigration, or it would have just been about sovereignty. But I don't think the problem is going to be a problem, because I think
that's what I want. Let's get that on a T-shirt. So that's what we want, Dawn. Thanks ever so much. Go in peace. No, that's what I want. I don't think the problem is going to be a problem, and there it is. That's it. The Brexiteer logic in an absolute a very sweet nutshell, Dawn, for which I thank you. I don't think the problem is going to be a problem, nor do I. Except, of course, I do. Steve's in Chertsey. Steve, what's going on?
Yeah, all right. I've been in construction for since I left school, 50 now. Seen all sorts of changes. Yeah. We always had the Irish ground workers. We had the Polish movement, which did. The argument is we need them. It did destroy, for a short time, the wages in construction. You were getting guys paid £120 a day, and you'd have Polish labour come in and work for 50. Obviously, it levelled out, and it has levelled out now. And I don't think the construction industry could survive without immigrant labour.
It's already understaffed, especially skilled. You want to be a plasterer or a bricklayer, you'd be quids in now. But then that's not the narrative, though, is it, Steve? That's all the middle class journalists like me sitting in their offices writing newspaper articles for the right wing newspapers are talking about how the construction industry is on its knees, completely ignoring the evidence from the actual industry, which is crying out for more skilled labour to come into this country.
Because their seats aren't at risk of an immigrant taking it over.
Well, nobody is, and it's actually that's not true anymore. If there are vacancies that we can't fill, how can you even reply to me by talking about people being worried about losing their jobs to immigrants?
You can't. I mean,
I'm talking about vacancies that can't be filled, and you come back with a Daily Mail line about, well, your job's not under threat from an immigrant. It doesn't make sense. That's not an answer to what I said on any level of logic.
No, I mean, obviously, I appreciate. I couldn't, if it wasn't for immigration, I couldn't go and get my coffee every day.
So, do you know what the girl in Cafe Nero said to me this morning? I said, "Have a nice weekend." She said, "We don't have a weekend." She said it smiling and laughing, smiling and laughing. We don't have.
Nobody in this country would ever want to do the work that a lot of these people are doing, and this I'll be honest. I was one of the 52%.
Sure.
And I think a lot of the people, not me. I've got a different vision, and I'm hoping that a light will be seen, that we could rebuild an industry in this country using foreign labour. I don't think we should shut borders. I think we need to use it for its maximum potential.
What do you have to leave? What did you vote for then? What did you vote to leave for then?
I think I was caught out by a lot of other people that thought it was a bit of a protest vote, never thinking it would actually come off.
How dare you laugh? How dare you laugh? Well, this is my children's future that you've sacrificed upon an altar of your own presumption. I'm smiling when I say that. I'm smiling when I say that.
Children's futures will be sacrificed.
Well, it's not going to be as good as it would have been, is it? Full stop.
It's going to be different.
Different, yeah.
But I don't think it'll be
Dawn
worse.
say? What did lovely Dawn say just before you came on? I don't believe that the problem will be. I don't believe the problem will be a problem.
Bless Dawn, cotton wool.
And where are we going to get this industry from? Given that, essentially speaking, the reason why our steel industry, for example, collapsed was because you can do it so much cheaper somewhere else. Ditto coal mining, which also has environmental issues. The car industry's doing all right. The car industry's doing all right, but we don't own any of it.
No, I mean, the steel industry, classic. That was not a lot. That was on the lead up to the Brexit, and everyone a lot of press coverage on the steel industry and the ship manufacturing. It's all going aboard, and everyone thinks, well, we can do that. Well, we can't.
That was Tatar Steel when they axed all those jobs in Port Talbot. Do you want to know? Would you like to know who
the right wing whipped up?
The right wing whipped up. Guess who Tatar Steel's new landlord is in London?
Do you know? I don't.
You won't know. No, you won't know. It's in my anarchy status.
Right.
Tatar Steel have a new landlord in London. They've cleared a floor on an office building in Kensington, and they're now paying rent in the millions to...
I would imagine it's probably someone from...
The Daily Mail.
Is it?
General Trust, mate, yeah.
Right. Well, there you go. There you go. See, it's all there. The information's there, but nobody really wants to look for it.
It's 2016. No one cares about information and facts. That's the thing. And if you don't care about information and facts, you will be frightened of them. And if you are frightened of information and facts, you will be shouting, "You lost. Get over it. Shut up." Was that brilliant phrase we got 2 hours ago, nearly? What was it again? Stop making people feel bad about how they voted. Man alive, that's the definition of the death of democracy right there. Stop analysing, stop thinking, stop asking, stop talking, stop doing journalism. Just repeat what I want to hear again and again and again and again. That's actually in Mein Kampf. Been reading it again. Seriously, that's actually in Mein Kampf. Just pick a few little slogans, a few little sound bites, and repeat them again and again and again. Can you think of any politicians in Britain that do that? Don't really like proper interviews, just like to repeat the same little sound bites again and again and again and again. Something like, I don't know, 75% of our laws are made in Brussels, or we want our country back, or putting the great back into Great Britain, or people have had enough of him, take back control. Just find a few little sound bites that don't really mean anything but appeal to a sort of jingoistic emotional groundswell and repeat them again and again and again and again. All the way to Sylvia in Weybridge. Sylvia, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello. Good afternoon, James. Thank you very much for putting me on air. Yes, this sort of Brexit subject and everything is very close to my heart. Being Polish, I'm 32-year-old, and I came to this country 12 years ago with absolutely nothing. But what I feel like that we should have looked at the immigration as a bigger picture.
But we can't. As members of the European Union, we couldn't change anything. That was the point, wasn't it?
Of course, but this is it, because the whole Brexit campaign was about European immigrants, because you can actually count how many there are. But how about all the illegal ones? How about, immigration in England doesn't go back to 12 years ago when you've opened the border to Polish people, or 5 years ago to the Romanians. It goes back in years, 1920s, 1960s. It's always been here. So sometimes I feel like
sort of Eastern Europeans are being scrutinized for it.
You are being scrutinised for it, and you're being blamed for it as well. And there are two reasons for that. The first reason is the economic crisis, and the second reason, and this is why I'm afraid I do believe that xenophobia is the right word to use in this context, was the refugee crisis. So you, as a hard-working Polish woman who's lived here for over a decade, somehow, in the minds of these people, get lumped in with people fleeing the war in Syria. I mean, personally, I'd welcome you both to Britain, but you're either a foreigner or you're not, Sylvia, under the post-Brexit.
Exactly, and absolutely, and also people were really afraid of Turkish people coming because they're going to join the EU. But guess what? You've already got about 3 kebab shops on each high street. They're already here. But am I not right? I mean, we are fearing something that's already. It's been happening. It's been happening for years.
No, it's been happening for centuries. You get an economic crisis plus a refugee crisis. You've got a problem. People like you will be in the front line, but we've got you back, Sylvia. Don't worry.
Thank you. But also what I wanted to say, I actually came here nearly 12 years ago. I was 21-year-old. I had literally one bag of clothes and I've had nothing. I couldn't even speak the language. I have never been out of work. And guess what? I have always worked legally.
Yes, but you've been stealing jobs from British people, you see.
Absolutely. But what jobs? I mean, working in a coffee shop.
Yeah, job stealer. Job stealer.
Exactly. But these days, today, I'm actually in the kitchen industry. And 2 years ago, me and my husband, who is also Polish, and we've been saving money to put for a deposit. We've managed to get our property 2 years ago. So you kind of looking at me being Polish, coming here 12 years ago, but I actually do work for England.
You don't have to explain yourself. You don't know. You listen to me. No, stop talking, Sylvia. Sylvia, you do not have to justify your presence in this country. You do not have to, any more than I do, any more than anybody does, okay? You will be judged by your actions. We all will be, eventually. We've just got to wade through a few more years of putting up with all the people who want us to be judged by our origins, our country of birth, or the colour of our skin. Imagine having a life so devoid of principle and pleasure that you think the colour of your skin is actually the biggest attribute you have. I gave you a little secret a few days ago. I just realised I've shared it with an interviewer, so I'll give you a heads up again, because there's a beautiful little thing that's unfolded on Twitter, and it actually involves someone from within my box of trolls, someone who I've already blocked. The story, you may not remember, it was years ago. A bloke rang in to talk about how a hardy perennial of conversations that we've had. How is immigration affecting you, or how is this issue affecting you directly? And he rang in to tell us that there was a prayer room at his daughter's school. Do you remember? He said, well, they've got a prayer room at my daughter's school now. And I just knew he was lying, because these people usually are. So I told him we had the school on the other line, and they said they hadn't got a prayer room, and he sort of folded like a cheap suit. And Tony's in Bounds Green. Tony, what do you think?
James, I'm a UKIP supporter, but I don't want you shouting at me straight away, because I find that's what you tend to do these days. What's interesting is who is actually making policy. Immigration...
Can we talk about last night's debate? I'm saying that very quietly.
Let's talk about last night's debate. If you look at the immigration issue is a very complicated one. We've ended up with being pro and anti, rather than who actually makes immigration policy and how many people should be allowed to come and go. We've got a fake argument between those who are anti-immigration and those who are pro. It's about the numbers and about who makes the decision.
What happened last night?
Well, what happened last night is Nigel Farage made a great point that a government, or in fact a constitution, our now constitution, has given unalloyed rights of 485 million people to come.
So that number resonates with you, my friend?
Well, it's not the number, it's the fact nobody knows the number. That's the great crux of it.
I thought you just said it was 485 million.
I'm talking about the actual number of people that will or will not come in.
So the thing that you're frightened about, you don't know the number.
I'm not frightened about it.
Troubled, concerned.
No, I'm not frightened. I don't think a responsible government should have no immigration policy whereby nobody comes or huge numbers.
But don't you have to gauge your reaction according to the scale of the problem rather than the potential problem?
Well, you cannot doubt that we've had a massive immigration into this country in the last 10, 15 years.
But it hasn't been a problem.
Well, it hasn't been a problem for you, but I can assure you it's been a problem for a lot of people.
How has it been a problem for you?
Well, if I go to a school and I want to put my children in a school and I'm told that the first thing I'm told is that they have a prayer room, the second thing
Did that happen to you?
Yes, it did, and a lot
Where's
of teachers...
the school?
Can I just finish?
Well,
and a lot of teachers...
actually, I want to clarify a couple of details first, and then you can finish. Where's the school?
I'm giving you the details.
Where's the school?
I'm giving you the details.
What's it called?
and teachers wearing badges saying, I speak Bulgarian.
What's the school called?
Broomfield School.
Whereabouts?
In North London.
And they have a prayer room that you think is a result of EU migration?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I mean,
so that would be Muslims, would it?
What you've got to do is let people speak rather continuously interrupt.
No, Tony. What I have to do is highlight the detail of the claims that you're making. So Broomfield School in Bounds Green has a prayer room that you think is full of Muslims who've come from the EU.
I don't like the way you say "full of." I'm talking about priorities. What you're doing?
No,
here,
you're not. You're talking about a prayer room.
What you're
Tony.
doing? You talk.
Let's just clarify the details that you've said.
I am clarifying.
So the prayer room. Who is the prayer room for?
I'm clarifying.
Who is the prayer room for?
You do not believe there are pressures.
We're talking about a debate from last night, and you're talking about a prayer room in a non-existent primary school.
Well, let's talk about the debate last night. The debate last night was about who governs Britain.
Hang on, I think we've got the school on the. Have we got the school on the line? Can you talk to them, Tony?
Oh, this is a form of bullying, isn't it?
Why? You just named the school. I think we've got them on the line.
You really don't understand.
Can you talk to them about the prayer room and the badges, or not?
You don't understand what's going in the country. You don't want to talk about it. This is the problem.
Tony, do you want to clarify the point you made, the first point you made about prayer rooms, or do you want to challenge my view that people who support UKIP will always start telling fibs? We've spoken to the school mentioned by Tony in Bounds Green. They haven't got a prayer room. They've never had one. That's why I get cross. I know sometimes you don't like it when I get cross. If people lie to you, I'm getting cross on your behalf, especially when they're lying about things like that. You say, how has this immigration problem affected you personally, as opposed to you're affected by people like Farage throwing around meaningless numbers that they admit they've made up? How has it affected you personally? And Tony said, I don't want to go to a school with a prayer room. Name the school, he named it, we phoned them up, they haven't got a prayer room. I'm really sorry, guys. That's why I get cross. Because people lie to you. But the mystery of life at the moment is he would have gone away even more convinced that immigration was awful. Even though his big example of how it had affected his life was a lie, he would not have gone away thinking, as this chap has just tweeted me, I don't know what you've done, James, but today you've totally changed my views politically. What a great show. You're a very fair man. So he wouldn't have done that, the other fella. He'd have gone away with his pants pulled down, having been outed as an absolute BS artist and essentially a racist liar. But he'd have gone away even more loud and shouty about immigration. And there's a beautiful example of that that The Independent have published, involving, as I say, someone who's actually in my box of trolls. So it was in response to that story we've covered quite a lot, the notion that Theresa May says Christians must be free to speak about their faith and Christmas without fear of repercussions. The biggest load of hogwash, even by the standards of modern politics, that we've seen in some time. And a chap on Twitter, who I know actually, said, I'm so pleased nobody will be afraid to discuss Christmas anymore, just like nobody was before. Another entirely invented crisis averted. So that gets retweeted by Dom Jolly. You remember him? Hello, I'm on the phone. And this fella from my box of trolls replies and says, laugh all you like, Dom, but some schools in Tower Hamlets don't celebrate Christmas anymore, only the holiday festival. So Alex Andreu piles in on this and says, which schools? And Trollface comes up with St. Luke's and Bonner. So guess what Alex does? He does what I do. He goes online, he finds the website for these primary schools that don't celebrate Christmas anymore because they're not allowed to. And now, of course, on school websites you can see the calendar. And what does he find on the school calendar? Christmas disco on December the 15th. Oh, and a Christmas nativity mass on December the 12th. Remember, this is the school that the racist trolls said weren't allowed to celebrate Christmas. So they found the school and they found the calendar, Christmas nativity mass, Christmas party, 2 weeks of Christmas holidays. So they go back to this fella and he says, oh, right, my mistake, wrong school. What about the other one? So they go to the other primary school in Tower Hamlets that this racist troll on Twitter is. And the reason it's important is because it's an echo chamber, so usually he doesn't get challenged. Usually he just shares this nonsense and this rubbish with other people that like it and don't and actually want to believe it. So you go on, you find the other school, and that calendar is full of Christmas. Christmas performance on the 10th, Christmas performance on the 11th, Christmas lunch on the 15th. Hanukkah starts on the 6th of December. They've got that in there as well. Christmas parties on the 17th, another Christmas lunch on the 16th. They've even mentioned the winter solstice just to keep the Druids happy. That's unfolding on the 21st. So goes on Twitter, tells barefaced lies about schools that don't celebrate Christmas anymore, and then comes back with this. Okay, I can assure you that's not what happens on the day. Staff have told me. And that's where British politics is now. Racist lies going unchallenged, and then when they're challenged and exploded and unpicked, just another lie to back it up. And you wonder why we're spooked about Brexit. Seriously, 12:54 is the time. What's on the other side of the door? Frank's in Chesham. Frank, what are the scores on the doors?
Right. Until we're out, we don't know what's on the other side of the door. No, we don't know what's on the other side of the door because the EU will not tell us what's on the other side of the door, and they're playing hardball. But the problem is people are scared of change. I'm an immigrant. I'm South African, or I'm African. I've come into the country because my wife's British. She was born here. And I voted out. And I stand by my vote. I'm not concerned about getting out. Yes, there's going to be economic knock-ons, but you get around it. I've lived by changing.
Well, how though? I mean, if I'm going to be poorer, how do I need to change to be richer?
Okay. The problem is, people today have got comfortable. They're scared of change.
Yeah, you've said that twice now. I just want to know if I'm poorer, how do I get richer by changing?
You're talking about one individual item. Okay, let me tell you. I've lived through the Zimbabwe crisis. I've lived through the South African crisis, and I'm not scared of change. Change comes, you adapt. Businesses adapt. So if we're out of the EU, if we're out of what everybody likes to call the common market or the little bubble of the EU market, and we have to go to WTO tariffs, so be it. There will be losers and there will be winners.
Who will be the winners?
Okay, there will be losers.
Who will be the winners?
Let me talk, okay? And then I'll explain. Let me talk.
Just tell me who the winners will be.
The winners will be the companies that take advantage of the changes.
By paying tariffs that they didn't have to pay before?
No, because there will be certain tariffs that will be imposed on imported goods. Local companies will then take up making that item or producing that good like UK farmers will now find it more competitive to go into that
UK farmers won't be able to sell abroad without tariffs. They can currently sell to the largest single market on the planet.
Correct. They won't be.
So they're not going to be winners.
No. But
so who will be winners? Who will be the winners, Frank?
No. Listen to me.
I am, Frank, very, very closely. I suspect I'm listening to you more closely than you are. So who will be the winners?
Okay. I'm telling you.
I know, and I'm waiting.
Right. What will happen is imported goods will have tariffs. Local manufacturers will pick up that slack because it'll now be more competitive for them.
What sort of products are we talking about here? Because it was farmers a minute ago.
It could be anything.
Well, they're not manufacturers, are they? They're growers. So what sort of industries are you talking about? I want to know who the winners will be.
Okay, you say that...
what sort of goods? What sort of manufacturers will be the winners? What sort of industries do you see benefiting from having to pay World Trade Organization tariffs?
The businesses that take up the slack.
What sort of businesses? What will they be selling? Give me an idea.
It could be anything.
Anything? Anyone could do better by having to pay to trade abroad.
It's easy to sit and pick fault.
You're telling me, Frank, but sometimes it's easier than other times, my friend. Have a great weekend. And that's it. That's where we are. Old Frankie boy. Been to Zimbabwe, he's not scared of change. We're all going to be better off, even though we're going to have to pay 10% just to wash our teeth in the morning. Crumbs.